Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Weiner, Program Manager of Education and Practice at the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. Thank you for joining us for today's ASPPH Presents webinar, an overview of SBP CEPH accreditation. Today's webinar will be 1 hour in length, which will include a question and answer period after the presentations. This webinar is part of the 2016 ASPPH Presents monthly series. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the ASPPH website in the archived webinar section soon. Additionally, this webinar has been approved for 1 hour of CPH continuing education credit. A few housekeeping items of note. While you are in listen-only mode and your lines have been muted, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation by using the question box. We will address your questions at the end of the presentation. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Nicole Williams, whose primary responsibility at CEPH is to coordinate the accreditation of standalone baccalaureate programs, or SBP. She is the primary point of contact for all SBP accreditation inquiries. Nicole reviews SBP applications and works with applicants as they move through the accreditation process. She received her MPH degree in health policy from George Washington University. We also have Dr. William Kernan, a Master Certified Health Education Specialist, who is an expert in needs assessment and research design, and is a skilled public health educator and evaluator. He is a professor of public health at William Patterson University of New Jersey and is a chairperson of the department. Dr. Kernan's scholarly areas of interest include community-based substance abuse prevention and research. We also have Dr. Jason Coleman, an associate professor and leader of the Bachelor of Science program in public health at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. He is also the director of the Midlands Sexual Health Research Collaborative, a multi-institution group of faculty, staff, and students who focus on research, advocacy, and education in the field of sexual health. Thank you all for being here today. I'm now going to turn it over to Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited today to go through primarily the CEPH accreditation applicant process for SBPs. And so we will go through that and then hear from some examples and then take your questions. So I'm really happy to be here today. So to get started, a little bit about us. We have been around since 1974. We're a private nonprofit organization with a 10-person board of directors, 9 staff members, and a number of very helpful trained volunteers who serve as site visitors. We are also a recognized accreditor by the U.S. Department of Education. A little bit about what we stand for. Really, the takeaway here is that our main objectives are to promote quality, assure the public, and improve quality in education for public health. We accredit 180 total units. 59 of those are schools of public health, 113 are public health programs that are at the graduate level, and 8 are standalone baccalaureate programs. We currently have 44 schools and programs in the pipeline, 14 of which are SBPs, and we accredit all across the country and internationally as well. A little bit about our council. They represent schools of public health programs, the practice community, as well as the general public. Currently, we have a vacancy in our public member, but that will be filled as of January 1st. So who makes decisions? That is the council's job. The council relies heavily on volunteer site visitor recommendations that they make through site visit reports, but at the end of the day, every decision is the council's. Staff are there to advise based on what we know of the council's past decisions, but we do not make any decisions ourselves. So that's a no on staff and a big yes on the council. The history of SBP accreditation has been long-standing. Since 2003, we've been fielding calls from the field, and over the past 13 years, we have been developing criteria, adding undergraduate to other units of accreditation, and then officially were recognized by USDE to include undergraduate accreditation in 2007. From 2008 to 2011, we really engaged with the field and drafted criteria, got lots of comment based on that, went back and forth, and eventually developed and adopted criteria in 2013. In 2016, our first SBPs were accredited. We currently have 14 applicants and 8 accredited SBPs, and these are them. And so the way that you become an applicant is explained in our procedures document. And the very first step is always to make contact with CEPH staff. After that, CEPH staff will help you submit a completed application. If your application is accepted, that starts your 2-year timeline during which you will attend an accreditation orientation workshop, you will begin the self-study process, you will be scheduling your site visit, you will be hosting a consultation visit, and eventually at the end of that 2 years, you will submit a preliminary self-study. Now that happens 5 months before your site visit, and you will receive comments from 2 council members, a staff person, and the chair of your visit on that document, and you will have the opportunity to make revisions before you submit your final self-study 30 days before the visit. And that final self-study is what the visit is based off of. After your site visit, you have a little bit more back and forth with us, and then you receive a decision at the next council meeting. That whole process takes between 2.5 to 3 years. Now, the first part of the process is contacting staff, and a big reason for that is for this first part, to define your unit of accreditation. SBPs include only the undergraduate public health degrees. That's the BPH, the BSPH, the BAPH, a BA, a BS, an AB, whatever it is that you call it, it is degree of undergraduate public health. We do not accredit minors, certificates, or associate degrees. And so you work with CEPH to establish what will be included in your unit of accreditation. Each unit of accreditation is responsible for following our procedures and criteria. There can be more than 1 unit at any individual institution. However, they must be completely organizationally separate, different schools, different reporting lines. And so CEPH staff is here to help you understand whether or not that's applicable to your setting. So after you do that and you submit your application, you start a 2-year process. So to submit your app, after you do that, you write your self-study, you attend the AOW, you have the consultation visit, and you're constantly working with CEPH staff to answer all of your questions, and we are here to help you be successful. That is our goal for you. Here's a different look at the timeline for those of us who are more visual learners with some example dates. So for example, if you were to submit your if you submitted your application in 2014, you would be looking at a 2017 decision. And so you can adjust those dates, and again, CEPH staff is here to help you figure out what dates make the most sense for your situation. Upcoming application deadlines. We make decisions, or the council makes decisions twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. The next meeting is in the spring, and so that's a mid-June decision, and so the deadline for all applications is May 10th. We strongly suggest that you submit your applications a couple of weeks in advance to me so that we can give you a staff review and help you get that application in the best shape possible before it goes to the council. The meeting after that is in October, and so the second deadline of 2017 is August 22nd. And all of these deadlines are available on the Dates to Remember page on the CEPH website. So what does it look like when you are working on your application? We have a template, and we will do a walkthrough of that now. It is a written application addressed to the President of the Council. It should be about 15 pages. This is not nearly as intensive as the self-study, which is about 100. The application template is available on the CEPH website, and you need to address each item in it succinctly and individually. And so there are 3 parts to the application. The first is a statement that you understand the process and everything that is required of the process. Attending an AOW, hosting a consultation visit, all of the fees associated with it. A request signed by the CEO and the Chief Administrative Officer of the unit that the program is located in, as well as by the program's designated leader. And documentation that the eligibility requirements defined in the procedures are met. So what are those eligibility requirements? The first is a statement of regional accreditation. If you are located within the U.S., you must be regionally accredited. Institutions located outside of the U.S. That are not eligible for regional accreditation must demonstrate a comparable process. The next is organizational structure. We want to see organizational charts that show the internal reporting of your program, as well as reporting from the program up through the lines within the institution. The next is your mission and expected student learning outcomes, the mission of your program, and then those SLOs. Those are what you would give to a regional accreditor. Next is that you can demonstrate an accreditable curriculum. So what do we mean by accreditable curriculum? Well, that's based off of the curricular criteria found in the SBP criteria, and that is criteria number 4, and there are 7. The first is the general undergraduate curriculum, and that means that within the general education, liberal learning, whatever you call it, you ensure that all students receive these 4 domains. Foundations of scientific knowledge, that needs to include biological and life sciences and the concepts of health and disease. So if your GE requirement is that students need to complete a lab science, and that can be completed with physics and astronomy, that would not be sufficient. You need to demonstrate that all students receive biological and life sciences. If that's not happening in the general education, you need to demonstrate that it's happening in your major requirements. Next, the foundations of social and behavioral sciences. Third is basic statistics. Again, if you have a general mathematics requirement that could be fulfilled by algebra or calculus, that is not sufficient. The Council in recent decisions has made it clear that a course in basic statistics is very important. And finally, the humanities and fine arts. One way of demonstrating that is through a template. Template K, which you will complete for the self-study but don't need to complete necessarily for the application, is one way of demonstrating that. It lists each of the domains, and then you will list the courses and other learning experiences through which those domains are introduced to students. 4.2 are the public health domains. This is the bulk of the public health major. There are 9 domains, and they range from the history and philosophy of public health to planning, to assessment, to legal, ethical, economic, policies, all the different aspects. And you can demonstrate these across numerous courses. We don't require that you have 9 specific courses, 1 for each of the domains. It's really about how to best present this information to students within your setting. And so the big template for the self-study is template L, and that's a big mapping exercise, and you're not expected to do this for the application, but it is a helpful way of sort of keeping an eye on where you're at. And that lists each of the domains broken down along the side, and then across you'll put your courses. And you'll demonstrate where each course is introduced and covered. 4.3 is specific credentials. So if your program intends to prepare students for a specific credential, like the chess, you will need to demonstrate that your curriculum addresses each area of responsibility for that credential. If this is not something your program intends to do, you can respond to this as not applicable. 4.4 is public health skills, and this is about students demonstrating the ability that they communicate public health information and have public health information literacy. And so the template for this breaks down those skills into oral, written communication, communication with diverse audiences, communication through a variety of media, and then the ability to locate, use, evaluate, and synthesize public health information. Now that's the important part. This is about public health information. So a general public speaking course would not fulfill this requirement. We're talking about courses and experiences within the public health major that teach students these skills and where students have the opportunity to demonstrate them. 4.5, the cumulative and experiential activities. Students have to integrate, synthesize, and apply knowledge through cumulative and experiential activities. These can be one activity, they could be multiple activities, whatever makes the most sense for your setting. And so students can complete an experiential activity in an internship if you require one, and that is where they would be applying their knowledge. But if you don't offer an internship, there are other ways to do this through service learning projects, portfolio projects. Programs are encouraged to expose students to local level public health professionals. And so you will demonstrate that you have both a cumulative and experiential opportunity for students to demonstrate this. This is the template for that. You will list the activity and then explain how you meet the criterion in a narrative. Next are the cross-cutting concepts. These are a list of ideas and activities and concepts that promote lifelong learning with students, and that's the goal. And so here, what we ask is that all students are exposed to the concepts. You do not need to prove that every single student is taking advantage of every opportunity, but that, in fact, there are opportunities for each of these things. So some may be addressed in a course, and others may be addressed in a co-curricular activity. For example, if you have a public health student organization and they host a semester networking reception every semester, that is a way to demonstrate networking. All students are invited, but they might not necessarily attend. But it's a way to tell us some of the things that are really interesting that you're doing at your program that maybe don't have another place in the criteria. So it's a great opportunity for you to be creative and show us what you do and all of the interesting things that your students are doing. And there's a template for that too. So that is how you will demonstrate an accreditable curriculum, by showing that you are meeting each of those criteria, not as in-depth as you will in the self-study, but by showing that each of the domains is being addressed. The next eligibility requirement is institutional commitment and fiscal support. Here we're asking about financial resources, faculty and staff resources, administrative support. Evidence of that can include commitments for new or reassigned faculty or staff resources, or any other resources deemed necessary for the success of the program. Next are your policies and plans for recruitment and selection of faculty, and then the policies and plans for recruitment and selection of students. For 3G, the documentation must include projected enrollment per year for each degree, program, and concentration, specialization, or track included in the unit of accreditation. Next, you need to document that you have a qualified designated leader. The designated leader must be a full-time faculty member at the institution. When we say full-time, that's what we mean. We don't mean anything related to tenure track or anything like that. Really that they are a full-time employee of the institution. That person has immediate responsibility for developing and monitoring the curriculum, and that they have educational qualifications and professional experience in a public health discipline. That could be formal doctoral level training in a public health discipline, a PhD or a DRPH, or it may be a terminal professional degree such as an MD or a JD in addition to an MPH. If the designated leader does not meet either of those qualifications, the program needs to document that its faculty complement as a whole has sufficient public health training and experience in its primary faculty members. This is particularly important because of the role of the designated leader in developing and monitoring a public health curriculum. So what do we mean public health discipline? It's anything titled public health, but it can also be related to a concentration or specialty area within public health. These are some examples. It's not exhaustive. If you have questions, again, always contact CEPH staff. We are more than happy to help you work through these questions. Moving forward in eligibility requirements, the next is a documentation of required faculty resources. So you need sufficient resources to accomplish your mission, teach your curriculum, achieve your student outcomes. At a minimum, we expect 2.0 FTE faculty in addition to the designated leader. So that's FTE. So that doesn't necessarily mean 2 individuals in addition to the leader. It could be 4 at halftime. And so again, questions related to this, your best resource is CEPH staff. We follow your institution's FTE calculation, so you'll need to tell us what that is. If you do not meet this requirement, you need to demonstrate that you will within 2 years or by the time of your site visit, whichever comes first. And then graduation data. You need to have at least 1 graduated class from the accreditable curriculum that you defined for each concentration within 2 years or by the time of the site visit. So that means if you have a BSPH with 2 concentrations, you need to have a graduated class from each concentration. A graduated class could be 1 person. And again, any questions related to this, your best resource is CEPH staff. So just to sort of loop back to where we started, we have gone through the application template, and so we're still on number 2. So when you submit that and it's accepted, then you get to begin that 2-year process, the AOW, your self-study, your consultation visit, and finally your preliminary and final self-studies and your site visit. So next, I'm going to turn it over to some of our accredited SBPs who have lived through this process, and they can share some of their experiences.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, actually. Can everyone hear me? Nicole, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. So welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Bill Kernan. I am the chairperson of Public Health at William Patterson University in northern New Jersey. We've been a BS in Public Health since 2005. We've had a bachelor's degree in health education since the 1970s, and I've always valued approval and accreditation processes. So we received notification of our CEPH accreditation status a few months ago, and our process began 3 years ago. So let me just move forward. Okay. So we are a fairly large program at our university right now. We have actually over 30 faculty this semester. 8 of us are full-time. We average between 21 and 29 adjunct and practitioner faculty based on the semester. And I would say if I were giving this webinar in 2010, I could tell you we had about maybe 25 to 35 majors in each cohort. we're well over 250 students in the bachelor's degree in public health, and for the last few years we've been the quickest growing major in the College of Science and Health. And talking to a lot of my colleagues at other institutions with BS programs in public health, that seems to be a trend for many of us. The growth has not slowed down. Our anticipated enrollment for fall of 2017 is well over 120 in one cohort. So that's a huge increase for us. We are a 53 credit Bachelor's of Science program where students are able to choose from 2 different tracks. Those students interested in health education and pursuing the CEHS, the CHES credential, can choose the health education track, and all other students do the general public health track. They both share a core group of courses, which is what allows us to be accredited by CEPH, but the track and elective courses differ based on the track. Our program, our undergraduate program, is a research-intensive program. We have a 3-semester sequence of research courses, and we also require courses in the 3 key areas of our university's mission statement, which are civic engagement, diversity and social justice, and global awareness, which all fit very nicely with public health, as you know. So our accreditation, our road to accreditation was, it was a lot of work, and as we reflect on the last 2.5 to 3 years, it was well worth the effort. Clearly we had some roadblocks and challenges along the way. One of them obviously was time. I think developing a timeline, or actually speaking with people who have been through the process before for the SBP programs and asking them what their timelines look like, not in terms of the overall sequence of events that Nicole just shared with you, but the timeline in terms of how you move through a semester when there are lots of competing things that we have to do as academic departments. One of them, which I point out in number 2, is our own institutional deadlines. For us at William Patterson, we have a very strict deadline about program revisions and course revisions, which is nearly a year before the course revisions or program revisions actually go into effect. So it's really about anticipating things that will need to change a year or 2 from the time that you're actually doing the self-study. And then another thing that we found difficult and wish we had researched a little bit earlier or made a list of a little bit earlier were all of the supporting documents that needed to go into what's called the electronic resource file, which is a supplementary set of documents that are evidence that your program is meeting the CEPH requirements for all of the different criteria. I think in retrospect, if I had thought about it or the department had thought about it, we would have made a list of all of those artifacts all along and had not waited until 6 months before we needed to put together to figure out where we were going to get all of these documents. In terms of advice, I think for us one of the most important things was having institutional support from the very beginning. We began the conversations about top-level support during the application process. Even when we didn't even know if we were applying, we found that that was really helpful, and spending a lot of time writing that very short 15-page application, because if it's well written, so much of it can be used later on in the self-study. Aspects of the self-study you won't need to rewrite, or you'll just need to edit briefly. Again, as I said before, developing a timeline is a really important process, and making sure that the whole process isn't 1 or 2 individuals' responsibilities. In our department, for instance, we used a team approach. All 8 of us and our internship site supervisor, we made assignments. We actually made a workbook that we used throughout the process. Everybody was contributing. Everyone was responsible for different sections. And then we had at the end 2 of us who were responsible for making sure that the overall self-study, which as Nicole mentioned is 100 pages, not including the electronic resource file, having someone making final edits so that it was readable and made sense and had a similar voice throughout. One thing that we did is we requested release time, time away from responsibilities around teaching courses, so that someone would be able to devote a little bit more concentrated time to the self-study process. And another thing we did, starting with the application process, is involving the stakeholders, and the people we found that were most helpful in helping us come up with answers to a lot of the questions and a lot of the criteria were students, alumni, and employers. So having those people identified and involved early on is really important. One thing I didn't put on here, which as I was just listening to Nicole, that we found really helpful was CEPH provides close to, I think it's 20 or so templates that you need to fill out. Our program actually found that we created probably an additional 20 or 25 tables or charts in order to collect the data before we actually wrote the narrative. It was much easier to look at information in table or chart format while we were trying to respond to questions and writing a narrative because it was already organized. And had we the opportunity to do it again, we probably would have started with just developing a lot of tables and charts in addition to filling out the templates from CEPH. So that's all I have for now. I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jason Coleman at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and I will echo a lot of what Bill just said in my brief comments here. We are a bit of a different size program than the program there at William Patterson. We currently have about 100 students in our Bachelor of Science in Public Health program. Our program began in 2011 as a BSPH program. Sorry, I'm trying to advance the slide. Okay, so our program began in 2011 as a BSPH program. It grew from an older program that we had called Community Health Education. And like William Patterson, we achieved our CEPH accreditation in 2016 during the summer. We currently have 5 full-time faculty spots. Only 4 of those are filled right now. 2 of those slots are tenured professors. 1 is a tenure track professor, and then we have 2 instructors. One of our instructor positions is currently vacant, and the other instructor position will actually become a tenure track line next year. So we're excited about that. We have a lot of part-time instructors that also help in teaching courses and providing field experiences for students. We have about 20 people on our roll of part-time instructors. We don't engage every one of them every semester, but they certainly are a critical piece of our program. Structurally, I missed the first point there. We are located in a College of Education, and then under the College of Education, we are within a School of Health, Physical Education, and Recreation. In our school, we have a total of about 15 or 16 full-time faculty, and of those, we represent 5. So some of the things as we went through the accreditation process that we learned was that we really learned a lot about our institution. Our old community health education program had, when I arrived here, 2 full-time faculty members, one of whom retired my second year here. The other one has been here for about 30 years and has a wealth of institutional knowledge, but as I came in and then the faculty that we have now following me, I didn't know a whole lot about our institution, and this process really gave me and our faculty in the program the opportunity to dig deep and learn a lot about our institution and the way things function. I was also surprised at how little data we had about student outcomes. In universities, we talk a lot about student outcomes, at least in this university, but when I started looking for data, I was really surprised at how little we had, or even the quality of some of the data. So the accreditation process certainly gave us the opportunity to rethink the type of data that we collected, to rethink how we collected data, and then to make sure that we got meaningful data that we could use to continue to improve our program. We are part of a 4-campus system, public university system, and we are not the flagship campus. So as we started to pull together our self-study, it was often a challenge for us to coordinate information gathering across the campus and the system. A lot of the policies and procedures were at our flagship campus in Lincoln, which guides the system. A lot of the policies or procedures that we needed were local, and so it took some time to untangle and just figure out really where to find policies or where to find guidance that we needed to complete the self-study. It was also a challenge for us sometimes to work with external partners to gather needed data. They don't have the same sense of urgency oftentimes that we do when we're trying to pull together a report. So that was a challenge for us as well. To that end, my advice to anybody is really to start early. And even if you're considering at this time applying to CEPH, go ahead and look at, for example, what type of data you collect and how you use that data, because that for us was a big issue and a big learning opportunity. Like Bill pointed out, we also spread our task across our faculty. We set up regular meetings in addition to our normal faculty meetings where we could come back and share the information that we had gathered. For example, one of our faculty members did criteria 4, which is the curriculum. We had another one do the advisement section, and then we met and pulled all that together. And then my role, in addition to collecting data, was to synthesize everything and put it into a unified document for our self-study. I would have done the same thing recommend the same thing that Bill did also about go ahead and start collecting the pieces for the electronic resource file. There's a lot of information that needs to go in there. Really specific to us, we were undergoing a web migration at the time we were doing accreditation, so it was a challenge for us sometimes because web addresses would change daily. But we got through it, and certainly would recommend to anybody to go ahead and do that. That part of the process. We set up an electronic file system to help us organize all the different parts of the self-study. I believe we used Dropbox for that, where we could share very easily documents with each other and check to see how far along we were toward meeting our timeline benchmarks. Finally, it was also very critical for us to have the support of the CEPH staff. I called Nicole, not regularly, but definitely a few times to ask questions and get clarification as we worked through the process, and that really was valuable toward the preparation of our self-study. Otherwise, I encourage you to go to workshops. That's one of the ways that I really got engaged in the accreditation process and learned was just through going to the workshops that ASPPH would host or that CEPH would host, usually in concert with APHA. That's what I have now. I'll be happy to answer any questions later in the webinar as well. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jason, Nicole, and Bill. As you see on the screen right now is Nicole's specific contact information if you have any questions you would like to send directly to her. They also have a Twitter feed to follow and a direct link to their frequently asked questions. So the lines are open. Please do submit your questions via the question box, and we'll be happy to answer them. So the first question, what expenses can I expect my institution to incur during the accreditation process?
I will take that question. So we have a published schedule of fees available on the CEPH website. If you have any trouble finding it, the CEPH website has a handy-dandy Google search bar at the top. And so you'll be looking for the 2017 Schedule of Fees document. Now, the Schedule of Fees starts with an application fee. And the application fee is $2,500 for SBPs, and that is payable after your application has been accepted. So please don't send us checks. Never just send us a check. We will always invoice you for any fees that are due, and you can then respond to the invoice itself. So that is an annual fee, and so you pay that $2,500 fee each year that you are an applicant. During the year of your accreditation review, there is a fee for $3,000, and that includes the review of your preliminary self-study, site visit logistical arrangements, and that is a one-time fee in the year of your review. So you only would get that the first time, and then the next 5 years, and then the 7 years after that. Once you're accredited, excuse me, the annual fee becomes $3,500. You will never pay the annual applicant fee in the same year that you paid an annual support fee. Other fees are for the consultation visit. All first-time accredited applicants who are applying for accreditation must have a one-day consultation visit where a CEPH staff person comes to you, and it is a full working day. We go through your document, we answer all of your questions, and the fee for that is $17.50. You should also note that you are responsible for any actual travel and living expenses for any individuals, your CEPH staff person, your site visitors who come to site, and so that varies based on your location. And so that, again, is available on the CEPH website. It is our fee schedule. If you have trouble finding it, let us know. And if you have any questions related to it, let us know. John Conklin is our office manager and also the holder of all financial information, and so he is a great resource for you related to that as well. And you can find his contact information on the CEPH staff page.
Great, thank you very much, Nicole. The next question, if I understand correctly, the SBP criteria were updated this past year. How did these differ from the previous version?
Sure, they were updated but not amended. Basically, we had the criteria out and working for about a year, and as all of you can attest, with the best intentions, nothing's ever perfect. And so what we did was we went through and we got rid of some redundancies. We reorganized a couple of the criteria so that they made more sense. We condensed some criteria. We separated others. So the content didn't change, just the presentation. And we think that the presentation, and have heard from those who started to use it and have seen both drafts, that the most recent draft is more clear and more helpful, particularly related to criterion 5, which is about assessment and programmatic assessment. And so again, there was no content change, just an organizational update.
Great, thank you. This question is probably for Bill and Jason. Each of you mentioned that a group of faculty or staff worked on your application. Is there a golden number that you would recommend for that group of faculty, smaller versus larger? Any recommendations?
I'll go first. I actually my recommendation based on the culture in my department was everyone, and that number happened to be 8. If I were in a larger institution, I don't know if I would recommend everyone, but I do think everyone in the department who's there full-time needs to have a good understanding of what the CEPH process is, about what they're asking of us, particularly everyone who's teaching in the major. So I don't have a recommendation for a magic number. My answer is everyone.
And this is Jason. At the time we did our self-study, we had 3 full-time faculty members, so we all worked on the self-study. I failed to mention, but meant to, we also had time from an administrative support person, so we had a staff person assigned to assist us as well, which really helped us with organization. The assistant director of our school also contributed a great deal to helping with the self-study and helping us guide us to information that we needed. So everybody in our case was also engaged, and I thought it worked very well for us.
Great, thank you both. The next question, how does one go about seeking accreditation for a bridge program, meaning a standalone undergraduate program with an option to add an MPH at the same institution in a 3+2 or 4+1 format, about 5 years to obtain both degrees?
So I'm not as familiar with the term bridge program, but when it comes to joint degrees, so the 3+2 or the 4+1 or whatever it ends up being, if we're only talking about an accredited bachelor's degree, what we are looking at are the requirements for that degree. So if it's, you know, you can get your bachelor's of public health, and then at that institution you can go ahead and get a master's of social work or something else, then what we really just care about are making sure that the curriculum and the program that we're accrediting meet the criteria. If we're talking about an MPH at that institution, if the MPH lives in the same departmental unit as the undergraduate public health degree, then we're probably not talking about an SBP, and that's when we would need to have that scope of accreditation, unit of accreditation conversation. So if you feel like maybe you are falling into that category, I would highly encourage you to send me an email, and we can set up a time to talk about it, because it sounds like it might be more of an individual conversation from that perspective. I would also just encourage all of you, if you are thinking about applying for accreditation, to just send me an email and let me know. And then that way we can start having those conversations whenever it makes sense for you. And if you're thinking about applying within the next year, we can talk timelines. If you think you're going to need more time, we can still talk timelines. It's never too early to contact me. So I hope that after this webinar, I end up with a bunch of emails in my inbox letting me know who you are.
Wonderful. This question might be a little too specific, but might also be applicable to others. This person is asking, their program has been in existence for several years, but was recently renamed to public health, wanting to know if they're eligible to apply now, or do they need to have more students graduate before they can apply?
Okay, no, that's a really great question. We have programs that are called all different kinds of things, community health, health sciences, public health. We really care about what's in the curriculum. So if the name changed but your curriculum is the same and it still is accreditable, then it sounds like you probably could apply with the graduates that you've already got counting. However, if there was a big curricular change to come into compliance, then you may need to wait for a graduating class from that curriculum. We can definitely have those conversations one-on-one, but if it's just a name change, you're likely good to go.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to give everyone a couple more seconds to submit their questions, but while they're thinking about those last questions, does anyone have any parting thoughts or advice on the call?
No, one thing I might say is I remember having a conversation with Nicole about halfway through the process, asking her if there were any good examples of what the final self-study looked like online, knowing that no SBPs had been accredited before. But what I was really asking for was, maybe looking at what a final self-study for one of the MPH programs looked like, just to get a sense of what the pages look like and where the tables kind of fell and what the table of contents look like. And I remember Nicole saying she was hesitant to actually give me any one example because every program is different. But I did end up Googling a bunch and found it really helpful to look at the different ways in which the information was presented. And if you don't know this, we are required, once we are CEPH accredited, to put our self-studies and our final CEPH evaluation report on our websites or make them publicly available, I guess, through email. And I can say for sure that I've seen a bunch of the SBP programs self-studies now that have been on their websites, and it's helpful, really helpful to go through and look at the ways that these self-studies look, particularly if you're early on in the program, so you know what the end product might look like. Again, CEPH might not necessarily recommend any one particular final document, but I think looking at a variety of them is helpful.
Bill, you are completely correct, and you said most of what I was going to say, but I will point out that now we do have 8 accredited programs. So what that means is that we do have examples, and while we might not say that universally there's a perfect, everyone should look at this, we are more than happy to work with you individually and talk about your program and see if there is a good sort of parallel track and give examples that might best fit your situation. So as more and more places get accredited, we'll have more and more examples. And so I am happy if anyone has wants to figure out which program is a similar fit to theirs. I'm more than happy to try and help you identify that. If you've got a specific section, we can talk about that. And yes, all of the self-studies and final site visit reports are all public documents, and so they should be made available to the public.
And this is Jason. I'll just contribute that I really appreciated going through this process for accreditation. Again, we've learned so much about our program, and I believe our program continues to get stronger and stronger every day, just as part of having gone through this process and being very aware of exactly who we are and what we do. So I certainly encourage people to go through the process, put in the time, and I think the results are very worthwhile.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences with us, Bill and Jason especially, and Nicole for walking us through all of the SBP specific criteria. And to all of our participants who spent an hour with us today, I want to remind people to contact Nicole. I'll put her information up one last time. And the PDF of the slides today are available as handouts on your screen, but also will be available on the ASPPH website, along with the recorded version of this webinar probably by tomorrow, but you will get an email following up letting you know when that is active. Please stay tuned for future webinars in the ASPPH Presents series. You can see them in our Friday letter or on the ASPPH events page or in the network newsletter if you are a member of the undergraduate network. And a final plug, please say the date for the 2017 ASPPH annual meeting and the 2017 Undergraduate Public Health and Global Health Education Summit to be held in Arlington, Virginia. Registration will be opening next week. Thanks so much. Have a great day.